I'm Arnav, and I have a passion for setting my kitchen on fire, or in other words, cooking.
What's your favorite dish to cook?
I love making butter chicken. It's just good.
Lovely. And I'm sure that also reminds you of home at university. I really wish I invested more time into learning how to cook before heading off to university. Like after a certain point, you get tired of American food, I guess, and you miss home. So
Exactly. Perfect cure for homesickness.
actually, so yes, that's Arnav Chenamaneni. He's a junior at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, majoring in computer science with a specialization in artificial intelligence. Today, we'll be hearing more from Arnav about the choices he's made, the lessons he's learned along the way, as well as be sharing a lot of insights and wisdom for listeners as to how we can best prepare for this upcoming and exciting next phase of your life that we call as university, which is absolutely a roller coaster ride of highs and lows, but worth it along the entire journey. So, welcome to Uni Unveiled. I'm your host, Arya Darod. I'm currently studying at Minerva University. Welcome, Arnav, and thank you for joining me today on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. So you've got about a week before you fly back to university. I'm sure it's been a long summer break full of both rest as well as interesting work. What have been some highlights of this summer break so far?
Just meeting my family, I guess, is a thing you take for granted while you're at university. Like how much your family is a part of your life, especially as Indians. It's just nice to be with them.
Awesome. What have you been working on in terms of projects over the summer break?
I've been working on like at least I think 3 projects with my friends. I've been building a couple websites just for a side project where we just match ingredients to recipes, or a side project by myself where I'm just making a machine learning code that can just solve Sudoku if you scan it.
Wow.
And yeah, aside from that, it's just been hanging out with family, cooking, trying to learn not to set my kitchen on fire.
Lovely. Would you say most people head back home for the summer break, or are many of your friends still back in Ohio?
My friends are like a mix of from here and from there. Most of them have gone back to Ohio, aside from the people that have internships that make them go away from their home. Yeah.
Yeah. If you were to describe the last 2 years of your experience at Ohio State in just maybe 2 or 3 sentences, which I'm sure is always a challenge, what would be those 2 or 3 sentences?
Um, it's it's not as scary as you'll think it is. It's quite nice. You meet a lot of great people. Networking is very important, and you
Hmm.
also learn so much that your confidence builds as you go along.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that's a good summary of university.
Mm.
I'm sort of relating that to my own first year experience at Minerva. So yeah, definitely not as scary. The scariest moment is probably getting on that flight and
Yeah,
traveling to the other side of the world. In my case, I did that like alone without family, which was even scarier. But it gets better from there, I would say.
right, right.
It's all
I
uphill.
I remember going on the flight and still thinking that these people are somehow scamming me, and I'd go there, there'd be no university.
Yeah, yeah. There's all sorts of emotions. I agree. Um, I'll rewind a little and we'll get into your high school days leading up to university because
Right.
most of the listeners of this podcast would be high schoolers. So they're currently working on deciding the country, deciding the major, deciding the exact institution, doing their applications. So I always love to dive into that aspect and sort of give them insight and guidance if we can. So I guess the first question I'll ask is you're studying computer science at Ohio State. What was the process of just finalizing this major? Was it very clear to you that this is the one and only thing you'd be pursuing, or did you sort of eliminate many other options and then land up at computer science?
Right. As a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist, which is the study of fossils. Obviously, it's not a very lucrative field, to say the least. But as I grew older, I started realizing how much I used to just rely on computers. Like I used to play video games all the time. I used to just be on like Google Chrome just to like test out everything. Like I'd open up the inspect element and see how the CSS would work.
Mm.
or it's just a curiosity in the field that I lacked in the other options I had at the time. So it just helped secure my choice.
Mm. And so it was, there were not other equally compelling options which you eliminated. Like you were pretty clear 11th and 12th that this is the major I'm going to be going into.
Right. Once I got into 11th and 12th, it was pretty clear. But before then, there was obviously like equal standing. Oh, what if you want to be a doctor? And then what I would do is I'd just ask a family member, like as a doctor who was a doctor, and just say, "Oh, how is this? How is dealing with blood?" And they say, "If you can't deal with blood, you are going to die." And I said,
Mm.
"Okay, computer science it is."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so. Like a lot of my 11th and 12th was honestly reaching out to seniors at different universities, plus anyone I knew in my network who was working in a field, and just asking like each of them, what is your day to day? What sort of projects are you involved in? What do you love and hate about the work you do? I think very valuable because many a
Mm-hmm.
times we jump into a field without even have ever studied it, and then we realize once in university that maybe this is not for us. So just to
Right.
avoid that, I feel like having a good idea of at least what's going on before jumping in makes a lot of sense, in my
Mm-hmm.
mind. So
Well,
yeah, Ohio State is a new name to me personally, but I've heard it's got a really good computer science program. Like I've once I connected with you, then I went into the website a little bit, and realized that there's many aspects which are unique compared to other universities which also offer a similar program. So, what drew you personally to the university, and especially if you can deep dive into what's unique about its computer science program?
right. Computer science is a very broad topic and program, and obviously everyone in it has their own goals in the field. Mine is relating to computer vision, which is taking images and the computer scans them, and it incorporates machine learning and AI, and it's just a very unique field. I love it a lot. Ohio State has one of the leading computer vision labs in the country, and at the time I was just very interested in how many resources they put into that. Like compared to the other universities I was looking at, they were still pumping out research papers every month or so. I was impressed, honestly, like how well funded they were, and I thought that'd be a great place to start a career in that place.
Mm. And such information you can find on the official website. It's all out there, or you have to sort of look deeply.
You kind of have to look into their computer vision lab thing, just like look in and see their people and look at the research paper. I'm a little like very in depth when I do that, but you can usually see all the computer vision stuff and how good they are from the get go.
Mm. For somebody who's into computer science, listening to the podcast, maybe it's the first time they're hearing of computer vision, or like in my case, I feel like the definition I just heard from you clarified it because the term keeps popping up in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a little more about, like you gave us a brief definition, but can you do a little bit more of a deep dive as to what exactly is computer vision?
Right. Honestly, sometimes I still get myself confused with it. It is a branch of machine learning and AI, and the way I use computer vision is there's a library in the Python code base that is called OpenCV computer vision, and you use it to scan images, turn them into black and white to make it read clear, and then you can have models like just trained models. Which, by the way, to any people that are in high school, do not train models on your laptop. It will set it on fire. Do not tell me. Don't don't do what I did. It's but once that gets going, you basically have a piece of code that you've written and you've trained that can look at, say, a car and detect the model, or it can detect the chances of it crashing by just looking in databases that I trained it with. It's a very interesting field, but if you want to learn more, obviously YouTube is your best bet.
Mm, mm. Any specific channel recommendations here? I can also drop them in the description if they don't come to mind right now.
Yeah, they don't come to mind right now, but I'll let you know.
For sure, for sure. I love to drop link in the description so people can sort of go down rabbit holes if they're interested. Not for you, but more generally for someone who's choosing to specialize in computer vision in university, what are a few potential career paths? Like, what can they look forward to in terms of the work they're doing after graduation?
Right. Computer vision obviously is a wide field. There's many things. One part of the field I was interested in at a point was self-driving cars. A car can't decide left or right without us training it. That's where computer vision comes in. That's where we as software engineers have to teach it what is good, what is right, and how not to just go full speed at a random person. It's a unique field, and I think it's very interesting.
Hmm. What are other potential options if someone is not into self-driving cars?
There's just identification stuff. So if you just scan past, it just identifies your face. You know how the TSA uses when you're going to the airport. Multiple things that would go into ethics, and that's a whole other class you'll have to take at university. Don't worry, I won't be able to say it lightly.
And I'm assuming also just research and academia, working for a university, publishing out
Yes,
papers on the field. I'm sure, especially because it's such an up and coming field.
exactly. Research in computer vision is one of the best parts of it because almost everybody is just very fascinated by something. It's a visual thing, right? Most time in code, you can't see it aside from a couple lines like output hello world.
Hmm.
In computer vision, you have visual clarity. You have an image, you have something on the side that says, oh, right, this is a car. It's just we're simple people. You know, if
Yeah.
you see a cool image, it triggers something. It's a lot more encouraging to go research into it.
Yeah. I mean, and especially not only for people like you who were sort of born and you love to code, but for someone like me who is like for me, reading let's say a file of code is less intuitive versus let's say visually understanding that code. So I'm sure that computer vision is also like more accessible in that sense to a non software engineering, non CS person as well. Um,
Right.
Lovely. What so far has we've touched upon the great computer vision focus of Ohio State. So apart from that, would love to ask you what has been one of the most enjoyable aspects of attending Ohio State so far, and then part to the question is what's been one significant limitation or drawback of attending Ohio State so far?
Mm. Well, Ohio State's one of the biggest universities in the country, so people, I guess, is a major point. You get to meet so many types of people. I can't guarantee they'll all be good. I don't worry. But you'll also meet some incredible people and people that'll help you further your career, further your life, and just good to have around. That's, I think, the best part. A drawback, I'd say, is the weather. Anyone that's lived in Ohio can attest. The weather is terrible. Obviously, you expect cold, it's northern, it's near the lakes, but it also gets surprisingly hot, up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which I wasn't expecting. I'm from India, even I wasn't expecting to walk out one day and start sweating so much. And it'll just flip flop between blizzards and heat storm and blizzard and heat storm, and it takes a toll, to say the least.
I'm sure it takes a toll. I mean, like I was lucky. San Francisco is like one of the most moderate cities across. Like it's
Yeah.
super long. It's like between 10 to 20, so no problems with the cold or the heat. I think probably like one of the most less thought about factors when choosing the university is the weather. And then once you get there, you realize I'm going to be spending 4 years of my life here. That this was something I should have at least had in the back of my mind before jumping into this as to what is the kind of weather I'll be living in and day out. Especially, let's say, for many of us coming from India, and I know people who have gone to Canada or gone to the northern US, and it's really a struggle, especially through the whole first year, to get used to the cold. So just keep that as in the back of your mind, at least preparing yourself for what you're getting into, I think is valuable, like for anyone before jumping on that plane. Um,
A tip I think I'd like to give is that don't ask the people there how the weather will be. They've gotten used to it. They've grown up there as if like, if you ask us how hot it is here, we'll say hot, but we won't be able to describe the magnitude it'll be for someone that's lived in -20 their whole life.
yeah.
Ask people that have moved there recently because they'll understand all your pain the most and will advise you the best.
Yeah, that's a pro tip. So that's this is exactly why I love doing the episodes with current students, especially. Is so many of these like small pro tips which you just won't find online or on an official website. But like these are truly the gems of the podcast. So that's a
Mhm.
really good tip to ask to give. Um, Now that you've mentioned one of the challenges of living in Ohio, just so we're not upsetting anyone for whom this is the place to live, what would you say are the more enjoyable aspects of the city outside of your campus? Like, what are more enjoyable aspects of living in Columbus, Ohio?
Right. Um, from my friends, I've learned most colleges are in very out of the way towns. It's very rare that like a university is right in the middle, and I'm very lucky to have it right in the middle of Columbus. As university students, we're allowed bus passes, so we have an unlimited way for public transportation. So we
Mm,
can explore the city, and so it's a nice city. It's obviously not as big as other cities, especially in Ohio, Cleveland and Cincinnati, but it's calm. It's has incredible food if you're willing to go look for it,
mm,
and a lot of extracurricular activities. You can go to the zoo, which is apparently one of the best in the country. I didn't know that until I went there.
mm,
And professionally wise, we have a lot of new tech companies moving in. I believe Chase has a massive office, one of the biggest in the country, right in Columbus. We have Intel moving there. We have Nationwide as a bank. We have multiple tech stuff and conglomerates moving towards Columbus.
mm,
And I can't tell you exactly why, but I can just tell you that it's probably a great place to look for.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. So for anyone who's having Ohio in mind, I know it's maybe something that doesn't come as, let's say, the top five cities where I'd like to study when someone's thinking, but sounds like this is, especially for someone I think who wants that mix of like the quieter town plus also these
Exactly.
opportunities and the ease of living in a city. It seems like the best of two worlds just from what I've heard you describing right now. Do you think
Exactly.
that's a fair statement to make?
Yes, yes. It's mostly quiet, but the further you go into the town, it'll get a bit more. But it's still a very comparatively relaxing place. It's
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep.
Would love to walk, and this is a question I pretty much ask on every episode because as a high schooler, the number one thing everyone is thinking is university applications, university applications, university applications. How do I
Yeah.
make them superior in terms of variety of activities or quality? How do I up my grades? How do I write my essays? So I love to deep dive on like each episode because I'm sure everyone has a very different journey. So in your case, aside from I'm sure good grades were there. I'm sure standardized tests went decently well. Aside from that, focusing on extracurriculars and essays and just pitching yourself to the university as an interesting person. What were some of the activities you engaged in high school to craft your application and be as strong and attractive a candidate as possible for Ohio State?
I think the biggest tip I ever got about applications is that you have to maximize specificity. You need to be as specific to the university. You can't just generally apply. You can't just say, I am a great fit for Dash University and just fill in the blanks every single essay you write. You have to go out of your way, learn more about the university, and show them that you actually want to be there, that you have a passion to be there. Something I did was that I did a lot of research into the computer vision laboratories, and I put that into my essays. And I put names of the researchers and the labs and all the new technologies they created. And I think that helped because it showed that I actually took time to like appreciate what's at the university and that I would appreciate it if I was accepted.
Hmm. And again, majority of this information was on the official website, or did you have to do a lot of other browsing on the internet?
I think the max amount of browsing is like 15 minutes because just 15 minutes goes a long way. You can get so much information and already you'll be ahead of most people.
Hmm. Most people don't even put in those 15 minutes, is what you're saying. They
Yep.
just, yeah, I've seen people who actually just, this is the essay and they're just changing the university name or the professor name. But it shows through, right? For someone who's evaluating like hundreds of applications a day, I'm sure yours stands out in terms of like this person has really put in the time, especially if that is like among your top five or your top 10, your dream universities. Uh, Lovely. Um, and what would you have done differently if today you could start over from scratch on your university applications? Like, let's walk through some of the mistakes you made just so listeners of the podcast can avoid them.
Right. Mistakes are inevitable. I think it's just a good thing to start with. Everyone makes them, and it's hard. It's good to not beat yourself up over them. Everyone grows, and eventually you'll get better learning from them. My main mistake was just not making myself stand out more. Obviously, I just said I did it in my essays, but that's because I didn't stand out in my resume. My resume, I barely had experience. I had one very small internship at a company here in Hyderabad, but aside from that, I had almost nothing. And basically, if you don't have something there, you have to compensate for it in the essays. Or but if you have everything set, no matter where they look in your application, they will not see any faults. You're just a perfect candidate. You just make sure that it's hard for them to see past your greatness.
Yeah, hard for them to see past your greatness. That's a good line. That's a good line. Um, to conclude this first section of the episode, before we jump into your actual on the ground lived experience at Ohio State, if there's a high schooler listening who's currently working on their applications, any one or two pro tips or like best practices for them to be following?
Once again, I think it just goes back to specificity. Um, you have to make yourself stand out, obviously. If there's something very unique about something you did, then obviously you'll stand out more. I remember one time at a career fair, I was helping build a website that tracked endurance racing horses. It's a very out of the way topic, it's a very weird topic, but that helped me stand out to many recruiters. So that same way, maybe like a couple side projects, very unique, volunteering, or just anything that helps stand out from the crowd would go a long way.
Mm, getting into like those niches which just you are obsessed about, this specific niche in computer science or the specific niche in psychology or biology, where it's just people have told you that why are you so obsessed with this XYZ topic, and then that I think goes and becomes a great project to pitch to your university. And like there are 100 people, let's say, building websites, but only you had this specific niche into endurance racing competitions, right? And so
Exactly.
that's what sets you apart. So yeah, lovely. This was a great first segment. We will fast forward a little bit, and you're just entering your third year at Ohio State. So
Right.
you're about halfway through the journey. I would love to start by asking you, each year at university comes with different priorities, different challenges, different friend groups, different classes. On a higher level, I would love to ask, how would you differentiate your first versus your second year at Ohio State? Plus, how do you think your third year will look different from these two?
Right. I think everyone's first year is pretty scary. You have no idea what's going to happen. You're just going into a foreign place. You're new people, new schools, new everything essentially.
Hmm.
But like, I think you have to just get some courage and start being able to rely on people that you've met and be more confident in yourself to lead through your classes, get good grades. Once you start learning more and meeting more people and talking to more people, eventually you'll just keep going up. Um, my second year was basically just like once I figured out how to live there, it was just now focus on how I should thrive there.
Hmm.
You have to like advance in yourself. How do you get higher in your course grades? How do you stand out to recruiters? How do you make yourself known to your professor? Which is a tip I have to give. Make sure your professor knows your name. They
Hmm.
know your name. It's easier for them to write a recommendation letter.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah. For the third year, I mean, I'm not there yet, but I think now that I have a good handle of my stance in this place, I can leap off, try to go more into the industry wide stuff now that I'm advanced enough in computer science that I can do jobs. and I'm just curious as to what I can do now.
Hmm. To focus in on this first year, which is especially for some people it's the first semester, for some people it's the entire first year, which is
Right.
continuously you're still questioning yourself in the back of your mind. What am I doing here? Do I fit in? Imposter syndrome, and just a lot of challenges, especially for those of us who are used to living at home our entire lives, and then we're just on the other side of the world, away from home. Any way to fast track the scary process and get comfortable and get settled, and as you said, begin by living and then move on to thriving. Any way to like fast track this difficult process, and switch from this living to thriving mode, especially during first year?
Um, well, first you have to admit, like, it will be difficult. You can't just hit the ground running and immediately become like, yes, I am the best American first time. But you have to just try meeting as many people as possible. I feel perspective helps a lot. Meeting other international students, learning what they think, meeting domestic students and learning what they think of you or how you react, and just trying to fit in is just a lot easier when you have multiple people also trying to fit in and also telling you how to fit in. It
Mm,
just calms you down. You share your anxiety as a group rather than just one person compressed.
yeah, like shared struggles and challenges is how we actually bond. That's how I made quite a few of my friends initially in the first semester. It's we'll just be sitting down at lunch and just each of us talking through our homesickness stories. And
Exactly.
that's a great community bonding moment. I'm sure now you look back on those days, and those are also like key memories and happy, maybe not happy, but like valuable memories you've shared
Exactly.
with those friends. So yeah, moving on to want to talk a little bit about academics, and I would love to do a little bit more of a deep dive into computer vision and AI and exactly your course. But let's start with a higher level question. You did CBSE through high school. What would you
Right.
say are major differences, especially for someone who's listening who's coming from a CBSE background? What are major differences between your CBSE classes in high school and your course structure versus your classes and your course structure at Ohio State?
Right. So the thing with CBSE is that most of your courses are decided for you. Once you choose your path, quote unquote, you are stuck on those same courses for the rest of your 11th and 12th, and now you're on to college. The way, at least my university worked, was that you could just choose your courses. There is like a guideline that you can follow for your major. You need to get this class, which is a prerequisite to this class, and you need to get a stream of those classes to graduate your major. But the way in which you tackle that is a lot more open and free form. You can technically do maybe 8 years of college if you stretch it out. Obviously, I don't recommend, don't bankrupt yourself, but maybe like you can take like a bunch of self-interest courses. Like I took Greek history for fun because I just had that option, and it's just nice to be able to choose when you want to do the harder classes, when you want to focus on your career more, and when you want to just experience life, I guess.
So certain semesters you deliberately choose to take, like you know that this will be a more heads down, focused on my studies semester, and you take those harder classes. Certain semesters where, let's say, you're working on side projects, internships, you just want to have a more relaxed semester, you take more electives. Am I
Exactly.
in that correctly? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. If I'm super confused and overwhelmed seeing the course catalog and I really need help, who do I go to for help regarding my course selection?
Right. Obviously, first go to the advisors. I think every college has their own advisor. Email them, torture them is my highest piece of advice. They will not get back to you unless you keep emailing them every other day.
Hmm.
Once you do, they'll get back to you. You can talk. Obviously, sometimes they don't have your best interests. They want to keep you at the university and for as long as possible. So another good thing is to just do research yourself or ask people who are a year ahead of you. That means they just went through all the pain and suffering that you're about to, and it's still fresh in their memory, so they can help you get through it a lot quicker.
Yeah, that's a pro tip. And especially, I think a lot of high schoolers listening to this podcast are not aware that many of us, especially the international students, choose to fast track and instead of 4 years, graduate in about three and a half, 3 years. And there's a lot of best practices and strategies for that, which just no one told me before I jumped into university, and I heard it first, like from my seniors, which is the case for most of us. So we've covered that a lot on this podcast specifically, and I think it's well worth it to know, be aware of just how much time you want to be spending, how fast you can realistically get through it, and how to like speed up the process, because it's
Yeah,
also a huge investment, not only of money, of time and effort as well, like from our end. Um, you mentioned Greek history. I'm jealous because Minerva doesn't offer that class, but I feel like, especially after Percy Jackson, something I'd be super interested to know more about. But yeah, would love to. Again, I'm sure electives, especially from someone from a CBSE background, where you're taking like you've taken the engineering stream and you're taking these set courses. I'm sure it's a new concept to be able to go to university, be majoring in computer science, and then taking the weirdest and the most random electives on the side. So I'll start with the most basic question, which is what should you be keeping in mind when choosing an elective? Like there's 10 electives which are potentially interesting to you. If you have the chance to take only one or two, how do you like narrow down that list?
right. The way Ohio State's electives work is that you need a couple, like you need different types to progress in a university. You have to take something relating to literacy, to visual arts, to art and history, and you just have to hit those pointers. Something I would recommend is just looking at all the courses offered in each of those subsections and choosing what seems to be the most interesting. I chose my first one was history, and I chose Greek history, and I had a lot of fun. It was very interesting learning about all the stuff Greeks did back in ancient times. And I think the next semester I was able to do a study of food science, which is just an asynchronous class that teaches you how to just do proper stuff in the kitchen, teaches you the chemical reactions that help make food. It's just very useful to have stuff that has life skill electives because not only are you having fun while learning it, you'll also be able to apply it much later in your life.
Any other examples of similar life skill electives?
Um, Honestly, Ohio State's a bit odd in those we have sports classes. I guess you can learn volleyball, and I'm not sure how much applicable that is to life skills. We also had just CPR classes, or just like a training exercise. It just tells you how to react in high stress situations when someone is having a seizure or when someone is just having an allergic attack, like just Narcan or EpiPens or just stuff like that. There are classes for all of those, so I highly recommend looking out for them. Another major one is maybe budgeting classes. You could also take those, and those are extremely useful.
I'm sure. Yeah. And in my opinion, is that whatever elective it is, like let's say in your case, Greek history, and you're doing something completely different in computer science, maybe specific concepts you learn in the class won't transfer. But if you like generalize certain takeaways, like there's an epic and you learn a certain moral from that epic, I feel like that definitely generalizes, if not to like your course and your career, just more generally and broadly to like the life you live and in terms
Exactly.
your values and your beliefs, your exposure to different fields. So I would love to hear from you more actually, beyond just being a fun class and a break from your, let's say, more heavy normal coursework. What's the value of electives?
The value of electives is just, I believe, I'm gonna quote our gen ed curriculum like blog post. It's to make you a more well-rounded student.
Mm,
And obviously, as a first year, looking at that, you're like, what is this? Why, what are they trying to tell me? They're trying to scam me to make me take core classes.
mm,
But it's very useful to just gaining understanding of other fields. If you're just in your field and you're just tunnel vision, you don't know what's going on outside of it. The moment you take these other classes, you know what other people are doing. You know how they actually incorporate into your field. I was doing anthropology for one semester, and I got to see how my field, computer vision, was able to scan different bones and able to detect which type they were, which area they're from, and it's very enlightening to see how they intermix with each other, and it does make you a well-rounded person.
Yeah, the most seemingly separated fields, and you make those few aha moment connections. In your case, anthropology and computer vision. This is something like new I'm hearing also for the first time. Um, Plus, I think you're able to have a conversation about anything and everything, which is very valuable just in your day-to-day interactions in the world. Like tomorrow,
Exactly.
when you go and you meet a history buff, or let's say you meet an anthropology buff, you're not just two people who have very different interests with no overlap. You know a little about what they're doing. Perhaps they know a little bit about computer vision. That's what creates a relationship and a valuable conversation. I'm sure like the Greek history class is also an opportunity to make new friends in very different fields from you as well. That's the one thing. That's the one thing I have against personally universities, which are let's say only business universities or only engineering universities. Is I think the beauty of university is being able to meet intelligent people cross domain. Like tomorrow, you want to start a company, you are the computer science head, but you also know someone who's great with finance and someone who's great with marketing and someone who's great with the legal aspect, which are connections you've made through, let's say, that random finance elective you took at university. So
Exactly.
yeah, I love the deep dive. I love deep diving on electives on almost every other episode because that's personally to me that's one of the big pull factors to a US university versus even in the UK, Canada, and Europe. It's a lot more just major focused, and you take very few classes outside your domain. Um, Speaking of domain, I would love. I think it's time we actually get into your domain specifically,
Right.
and would love to talk. There are a lot of students doing a more general computer science degree at university, but for someone who sort of has an interest in computer vision and AI and is intrigued in Ohio State, can you say a little more about the computer vision and the AI specialization which you're going to be doing, especially in years 3 and 4?
Right. So the way Ohio State does computer science degrees is that for the first 2 years, you'll be doing the same classes as every other computer science person. You'll be taking introduction to coding Java, you'll learn C, you'll learn a lot of other stuff that is not as fun. But it's important as foundational subjects. But as you go into your third year, you're given a choice whether you want to do AI or whether you want to go into cybersecurity or whether you want to go into, let's just say, basic software engineering, website development. Obviously, I chose AI. And within AI, again, that talk I did about the courses structure in Ohio State comes back. Even within AI, you have to take two major classes. Those are mandatory. You cannot get out of them. But you can also take two classes of your own accord that are related to AI. I'm obviously taking computer vision. You could take machine learning and coding it from scratch on a laptop, maybe. God forbid. But it's just the mandatory courses are theoretical, and then the choice courses that you make are practical. You get to implement a robot that can just, I don't know, chop carrots or something. Or you can join a club now that you have that knowledge and actually apply to a self-driving car, which is also another club at Ohio State.
Hmm. Wow, you've still got a club for self-driving cars.
Yes.
And
We also have a self-driving bike, I believe, but I don't think they're as advanced as the car.
okay, okay. Um, where do labs come into all of this? You mentioned that Ohio State has got this great infrastructure in terms of labs. Can you say a little more if you've taken any lab classes or if you're going to be taking any? What do those look like?
So obviously, as you get further into your courseload, you'll be able to apply for lab positions. You'll have to. The best way to get to those positions are to get close with the professors that are actually leading the research. Usually, there's a professor that's teaching a basic class, but his research is actually separate.
Hmm.
So I remember my friend, he's aerospace engineering, and he made friends with his physics professor. And now he's doing research for him, doing government contracting work, where he's actually helping design missiles.
Okay.
It's just very important to communicate with the research head. Make sure that again that you're known by name, by career, by your standing and how skilled you are at your job. And then the research positions will just kind of come to you.
Hmm. This is where like making that extra effort outside of the classroom to connect with professors, maybe take them out for coffee, attend their office hours, schedule one-on-ones, talk to them about their work, and their research becomes like so valuable. Like the work your friend is doing, I'm guessing would have just not been possible if he didn't have that deep personal relationship with the professor.
Yeah.
So I personally believe like professors are just the most underrated resource at any university. Like I think every student should be taking double the benefit of professors that they currently are taking. They're just banks of knowledge,
Mhm.
wisdom, connections, opportunities, resources. Like I could go on and on here. Um, but do you maybe briefly want to touch upon how do you go about building that more personal relationship with the professor? Especially in your case, I'm guessing classes are too big for just you to be going to class and the professor automatically knowing you very well, which is maybe possible at like smaller liberal arts colleges. But let's say in your case, how would you approach building a more personal and customized relationship with the professor?
Something I did, I think my second semester, was I had a group of friends who sat at the back of the class, and obviously you can wave your hand and get the teacher to come to you and ask questions. Most of the time, we'd kind of just call the teacher, ask a very simple question, and then just engage in conversation. The more you talk to a person, the more you learn how they work, how they talk, how they think, what they think of you, and you can start building off of that. The more, honestly, yeah, just talk. Talk to your professors. Keep on talking. Obviously, make sure your grades are also not, completely nosediving, otherwise, their opinion of you is already kind of gone. But you kind of just have to make sure they know who you are, make sure that they understand that you're passionate about what they are also passionate about. And
Mm.
obviously, you find things in common.
Yeah, perfect. At the end of the day, maybe they're much older than you, maybe they're super qualified. I'm sure there's some level of intimidation. But the more you sort of view them as humans, the more you like strip away the titles and the accomplishments when you're talking to them, you also realize that they are also just very humble people. They love talking to people your age. That is why they are a professor. And so connecting with them, even on a human level, as a person, as someone beyond their research and their accomplishments, checking in, how was your day, how are you doing? I remember that you visited XYZ country over the break. How was that? I feel like that goes a super long way with a professor and building a personal connection. Like they will remember that you asked this question. On a super high level, maybe I'm generalizing, but I feel like just for the sake of the next question, this is the two broad buckets of students I've personally experienced. One bucket of students when they're flying to a new country for university, homesickness becomes like the number one fear, the number one worry. In many cases, unfortunately, it's the thing that makes them choose to study back at home and not even take the risk and make the jump. Second type of students are those who think that homesickness is not something which will touch me as much. I'm used to living away from home. It'll be okay. I'm going to value the independence and I'll be fine overall. I think both sets of students learn valuable lessons about homesickness along the way. Like in the first case, they learn that you do get over it over time and the struggle pays off. And in the second case, I feel like even if it's not missing family, there are definitely so many things you miss about home. And I'm sure it touches each and every one of us. So, to both these buckets of students, my next question would be if you could briefly speak to your personal experience and journey with homesickness, plus any macro reflections or takeaways which would be useful for a high schooler who is planning to study abroad.
Homesickness, I think you just have to accept that it will happen, no matter how strong you are, no matter where you are, no matter how just distant, I guess, you are. You will feel it. You'll feel that need, like, oh, I miss when I was just able to sleep in on a weekend and just kind of see my parents and see my siblings or something. And I think the best cure for that is to just understand that you're in a different place, in a different part of your life. Eventually, you will have to move out of your home. And you should just immerse yourself in that new environment. Maybe just whenever you feel homesick, hang out with friends or just hang out with something that is definably something that you can only find there. That way you'll appreciate more of what you have rather than what you miss. Also, I mean, a much smaller way, like when you just feel a little bit homesick, cooking is a great way. Having those flavors just triggers something in your mind that it feels like you're back home. Or obviously, I think the most important one is just to call your family. It's a very easy thing to forget, but you should always just call. It's a lot easier and it's easier on the mind too.
Yeah, 5 minutes when you're walking to class. It's also so lovely for your loved ones to just hear that you're doing okay at university. Like
Exactly.
they don't have that life update every single day, and so just letting them know they have also like they are your even though they're so far away. I would say they still are like your probably your number one source of support and motivation and love, even when they're halfway around the world. So putting in that effort to call, and I love that you brought up just anything that reminds you of home. In your case, seems like you're very into cooking. That's the case for you. Someone like me who can't cook, it's certain songs. I
Exactly.
love celebrating Indian festivals when I'm there with my Indian friends. That makes me feel at home. Traditional dresses for those like carrying one set of kurta pajama for
Exactly.
an event over there. Just reminding yourself that home is like more where the heart is or where the mind is. You can create that sense of home. Um, but yeah, any last thoughts on homesickness before we move on?
You touched on a great point, which is try to have a bit of it in your heart. Like, just seeing a kurta pajama in your closet is just enough. Like, I am Indian, this is my culture. And my culture isn't a place, it's a people. I am part of that people. No matter where I go, I am still that person. It's just a good habit to enforce upon yourself, and it helps a lot.
That's very well said. Yeah, I really like that. Culture is sorry. Yeah, culture is a people more than a place. Yeah, yeah. What's overall you've had 2 years of interacting with a lot of college students in Ohio State. I'm sure you've got friends going to universities all over. So again on a macro level, what's a dangerous trap or a bad habit that many university students get into, which is probably better to avoid?
I think it's just procrastination, I believe. It's very easy to procrastinate in college, as I'm sure you know. It's just because of that free-form nature, because you're just living there, you just feel a sense of relaxation when you probably shouldn't. You have to have that motivation to make sure, okay, get this done. And the moment you start losing that, it's very hard to get out of that rut. So my main piece of advice is to make sure you never get into that rut in the first place. Make sure you're motivated. Dedicate every week a certain amount of time to making sure you're caught up on work and never fall behind. It's a trap. Do not fall behind. Your professors will never talk to you if you start just submitting late.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's a very easy negative downward spiral, but I think parallelly there's an upward positive spiral, which is getting things done on time and being on top of things. And then that gives you that mental peace that, let's say, you become the apple of your professor's eye. And that's just an upward positive spiral. So it's your choice, sort of, which loop to get into. And you can also obviously cut off any loop just by not feeding it further. So it's okay if you've got it into it, but finding ways to get out, which honestly in my experience look very different for different people. So we won't touch upon pro tips or best strategies because I personally feel everyone has their own journey with procrastination. But what I do want to ask you about is motivation, which is I'm sure there are difficult weeks mentally, emotionally, even academically, when it's very easy for you to slack off or let's say go to a party versus sit and complete an assignment. How do you motivate yourself? Like, what's your motivation for doing well at university?
I think the first step to making sure you don't is to acknowledge that eventually you have to take a break. My friends and I like to call it a burnout time. You've been so motivated and so ahead on everything. Eventually, all that motivation will just feel like a burden, and you don't want to do anything else. So you just take a couple days. I wouldn't recommend like 20 minutes a day. It's more of a recharge for your entire soul, essentially. You need to make sure that you have what's willing to like what it takes to make sure you're motivated an entire semester. It's a very draining process. I need to have multiple rest days in between. Obviously, don't rest like the day before an exam. That's I feel like that's common sense, but just have a couple of days, like on the weekend, like on a Saturday. Make sure you recharge. Make sure you're not doing anything and your brain is not like stressed out all the time, and you'll be able to maintain that motivational streak throughout the entire semester.
Hmm. That's good. That's nice. What does a typical chill weekend slash rest day look like for you at university?
If it's a rest day, I try not to do anything like anything academic related because I think that would just bring you back and just like hold you back from actually enjoying. Obviously, that's a bit extreme, but sometimes you just need to like take a complete break. So maybe on a Saturday, I'll just go to somewhere in the city and just explore or walk around with friends or go to a restaurant or just sit down, watch a movie. You just need to recharge so that way maybe especially like the next Sunday, your brain is hardwired like, oh, you have all this energy, where are you going to put it? Back to academics, and just put it there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so there are weeks where Monday to Friday I'm just in two places majorly, which is my room or the library. And so
Right.
in my case, the biggest break is just getting out of those two environments. You got a beautiful campus, enjoy the campus. It has so much to offer. Whether you live in a college town or a big city, get out, get to know the place which you're in, walk down the streets, do whatever is your thing, which in my case is museums. For someone else, it's parks. For someone else, is cycling down or hiking down some trails. For someone else, it's parties. But really engage with the city you're in outside just the campus. I want to wrap up with a slightly drier and more boring topic. It's been like a much wetter conversation. We've touched about, in fact, we were just talking about how you spend your weekends. But I think it's very crucial for us to wrap up this episode talking a little bit about finances and budgeting. Especially as an international student, you're spending in a currency which is like much stronger than our Indian rupee, and so I think it's very crucial, especially also in the process of becoming from a teenager to an adult. It's very crucial for you to begin the process of taking charge of your finances and your spending. And if nothing else, at least keeping a track so you have an answer for your parents every week as to this is where the money went, even if it's not your money. So, how do you personally handle finances and budgeting? Like, what's your approach and mindset when dealing with them?
Right. It should. I think you should always start with what you have on hand. So when you go to university, you probably have like a basic amount of stuff, right? You have your laptop, you have your clothes, you have a certain amount of money, you have maybe a bank account, which is something I highly recommend. And if you haven't opened a bank account, um, just keep stock of what you have at the moment. And then the next step would be just making a weekly budget. It's a small enough time frame that you can track each day, and it's not big enough that it's just too wide encompassing and you feel a bit overwhelmed tracking all of that. Just like try not to go above maybe like 50 or 20 or something, depending on where you are. And obviously, that'll keep you ahead of most people already. Try to get a job on campus. Campus is made for students to find jobs, and you can find many jobs that'll pay well enough for part time. Having that supplementary income on the back of your mind is just, it makes it easier for yourself to go forward. It gives you a lot more confidence knowing that you're at least a bit secure money wise doing stuff. And I think the final tip would be make sure you have an emergency amount. Maybe like just have a couple $100 just in your bank account just in case something happens. Never dig deeper than that. Like it's like a hard cap. You cannot go below that, but you can always go above it. Please do. But make sure you always have that emergency amount because you never know when you need it. Maybe something hits you, or maybe you have to go to the emergency room. Maybe you have to emergency pay a lot of rent that you didn't realize you didn't have. Always have that on hand. I think that's the best tip I can give.
Yeah, I mean, to add just one thing to the emergency is for any reason having to fly back home is a pretty big cost, especially if you're in the US, UK, Canada. So the emergency fund should definitely cover that. Beautiful. Well, it's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. We touched upon a lot of different buckets. We into a deep dive of academics. We talked about electives, computer vision, touched upon homesickness, just touched upon finances. So feels like a very comprehensive conversation to me overall. Hoping it provides a lot of value to anyone listening, and would love to just quickly fast forward for a moment. And what do you see yourself doing 3 to 5 years down the line post graduation? Just so viewers also have an idea as to the path you're taking with a computer science degree from Ohio State.
Right. Obviously, I plan on trying to get into more research with computer vision or just computer science in general. Once I'd be able to get that, hopefully, um, I'd be able to apply that more outside in the industry. And just by having that research experience, you're obviously standing out a lot in the industry. You show you have experience. You showed you've applied it in the field, and I think that's just very useful. Obviously, once I'm in the industry, that's kind of the goal, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. So, do you see yourself potentially as a researcher, or you want to be working for XYZ company in computer vision?
I feel like it's important not to like tie yourself to a specific thing of a position or occupation yet. First, you have to check and see how it is for you. See if you actually like it, see if you do it. So that's why the best part about college part-time jobs is you can research for that certain field and you can see if you actually enjoy it or enjoy a certain part of it or industry wide. It's important to have that distinction. So I'll find out as I go along.
Yeah, great. I love it when once in a while guests do a throwback on the questions I ask, because that also really helps me for next episodes in terms of how to be questioning. But that makes a lot of sense the way you're approaching this as well. Awesome. Well, my favorite part of each episode is our fast fire round of questions. This is where we just amp up the pace a little bit, make a little bit more exciting and quick in terms of the exchange. So just a few quick questions, which I'll be just throwing at you, and you can also feel free to answer in just one short phrase or sentence. So we'll definitely start with the most interesting or fascinating class you've taken thus far at Ohio State.
I would say it had to be comparative religions, where we had to go to different religious sites and peoples and interview them and compare how they all interlope with each other and how they all work.
Another elective. So
Yeah.
just want to drill that point further. That this is like you didn't choose a computer science class. The electives are sometimes those memorable classes which you remember way after university. Once I'm guessing you've forgotten your C and your Java classes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your favorite weekend activity on campus or outside of campus?
Something I like to do with my friends is we have a movie night where every Saturday night we'll group together in one room and we'll just watch a movie eating popcorn. It's a nice way to recharge and it's just nice to be with your friends that way.
Yeah, that's great. One book / course recommendation for a high schooler who is interested in computer vision / artificial intelligence more generally.
Obviously, there's so many. I can't just recommend one, but there's a lot of resources that actually Google offers you in this path that I forgot what they're exactly called. But there's a Google Learning course thing that has a pathway where you can learn about AI, machine learning, and along the way you'll learn about computer vision, etc. And I think that's very useful. I actually recently did it myself.
Awesome. And I'll link all of those in description for anyone who's actually interested in checking these out further and doing their research.
Right.
We touched upon connecting with professors and the value they provide. So would love to ask you, what is the best piece of advice or insight which you've received so far from an Ohio State professor?
I think the most important one was it's not what you know, it's who you know. Obviously, knowing all your subject matter is important, but networking is extremely important to actually putting yourself out there and making sure people actually know that you can do what you know. So the who you know can actually take you much further than you actually expect.
And I think I would just add to that with another quote which I love, which is like, it's not your net worth, it's your network, which
Exactly.
will take you forward in your career. And so I think university is probably the time where many of us, it's the first exposure we have as to the true importance of networking and this whole wide world of career events and fests and different professional conferences. Any one networking pro tip, just because we're on the topic?
Just make sure you have friends in your classes. Make as many friends in your course load actually as possible. As you said earlier, making friends in the elective classes is also very important. Just because they're in different classes or different majors doesn't mean they won't just go to the same company that you want to be at. Maybe they're doing research for a company that you actually want to code for. It's just very important to not discriminate among the people that you network. Everyone is equal. Everyone is just as important as the other person.
Yeah, I love that. A seemingly basic computer science concept that somehow still confuses you.
um, when you get into computer science, there'll be multiple different coding languages you'll be able to do, and then they'll have multiple advanced levels, and they'll be simpler. It'll get simpler and simpler as you go on, as you try to understand computer architecture. There's a language called assembler, which is basically one of the most basic versions of code you will ever be able to do. You are coding adding. You will have to code math by yourself at a certain point, and it's a very frustrating concept. And once you get it, obviously, it's a lot easier. It's very fun, but it's still technically basic, I guess. But it's quite confusing.
Mm. So this is for all the people listening who are interested in doing computer science at university. Just keep an eye out and be mentally prepared for the struggle.
It will come. Don't worry.
What's the most rewarding aspect of university life for you personally?
I think it's just meeting people. I was kind of a shy kid, but as you meet more and more and more people, your speaking skills improve so much because people speak differently, right? One person will speak more in like a lingo, or other person will speak only in professional way. Like, and they'll be the same age as you, and it'll be very confusing. But you just train yourself to speak very well to different types of people, and that's a very, very valuable resource, and you should maintain it as much as possible.
Mm. And on the flip side, apart from homesickness, which I think we've talked enough about, what's the most challenging aspect of university life?
I think it's something relating to the feeling of going off the deep end. Your whole life, your parents have been there that have just been helping you go through your progress and obstacles, and they've been helping you go through stuff. As you're in university, there's no one to hold your hand, so to speak. You're kind of by yourself, you're independent. And I think just getting over that feeling that, oh, what if I go over the deep end? What if I go too far here? What if I don't do enough? Getting over that feeling is, I think, the most challenging aspect.
Mm. And I would say it's that growth and learning journey. It's a process. Like there's no day one and then day two. I am this perfect person who's independent and knows what I'm doing in life. I think the whole 4 year journey, even apart from all the things you learn, I would say from a self growth perspective, like what you just said is the most valuable part of a university education. Even when evaluating a university, when speaking to seniors, I think the biggest question from a self growth perspective in your mind is, will this place completely transform me in 4 years? And I'm using these as substitutes for like bigger meanings from a teenager to an adult. It's like the number one question. Like that's in my mind, that's the number one biggest value a university can provide to you is giving you direction, confidence, and clarity in terms of what you're doing personally and professionally after graduation. Whereas I'm sure many of us enter on the first day completely freaked out and uncertain about everything, and that's also okay because the university is there to like hold your hand at least in to some extent for those
Right.
students. So, sorry, I went on a rant there.
No, no,
I
it's important. It's important.
Um, lastly, if you had to wrap up this great episode with one final message to leave viewers with, most of our viewers, I'm guessing, are high schoolers, so between maybe 15 to 18, about to embark on this next phase of their life called university. Any last piece of advice or wisdom for university? And it can also be for life at large.
I think the best piece of advice I can give is don't be afraid. Obviously, everyone's scared as you're going into this new part of your life, but they will be the best years of your life. You'll meet so many wonderful people, learn so much, and you will always regret it if you weren't able to take full advantage of it while you were there.
Squeeze the juice out of your university. Utilize
Exactly.
every possible resource that they're giving you. Justify the cost. um,
Also, there will be free events at university. They'll give you so much food for free. Use them. You're paying tuition, you've earned that food.
yeah, for sure. This has come up on so many episodes that like the number one way to attract a student to, let's say, any if as a student I'm hosting an event or a conference, number one attraction tool or pull factor is just have free food and people
Exactly.
um,
You don't
become
have to stay there. Just pick up whatever like preservable food there is and just walk away. They can't stop you. It's a free country.
I love it. Brilliant. Well, unfortunately, we'll be wrapping up this episode. I feel like I could pick your brain for probably another hour. But for the sake of length, I think it's been a comprehensive conversation and let's wrap it there. I'm sure people can connect if they are curious to hear more or pick your brain about different aspects. So, what's a great way to connect with you if someone has follow up questions?
I'm always available on LinkedIn, which I'm sure you can just find by Google searching my name. I'll also give it in the description. And I'd also give my email, which is chenamaneni@gmail.com. Obviously, it's a hard thing to spell, so I'll also provide that. Don't worry.
Awesome. I'll link all of those in the description. And I do hope people reach out and pick your brain about certain important aspects. I feel like as high schoolers, many people are sometimes hesitant or think that they're wasting our time by asking for a call or asking us to go through application. Most cases, I would say we're more than happy to help. Like we've been in the same shoes, we've gone through the struggle, we have annoyed our seniors, and so we're happy to sort of pass down the favor. So feel free to reach out and feel free to pick our brain. And most, not all, some questions, like very few questions where you do zero research are dumb, but generally most questions aren't dumb. So do a bit of your research and then go ahead and ask the dumb questions. Um, we'll bring this conversation to a wrap. Thank you so much for your wise words on Uni Unveiled, and it was a pleasure to host you on the podcast, Arnav.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure answering all your questions, and you're a wonderful speaker, I must say.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.